everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. I am here today with Darren Yeow, and we are going to do an interview with him talking about his life, his art, his career, and everybody welcome Darren.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say hello to everyone out there. Thanks to Noah for doing this. Big privilege. I really enjoy all your artwork and everything. So I'm a big fan of your stuff. Sorry I couldn't do the video. Where I am, the internet's really slow. So video would just make it a huge lag in between. I've got like 11 pages of notes here, so hopefully that's enough.
So we'll be talking for a while, but this is going to be good.
Yeah, and hopefully people get something out of it. So
so we will be taking questions at the end, but feel free to chat in the chat box. But let's go ahead and get started with the interview. So Darren, how did you get started as an artist?
Well, I got started, I think, at a relatively young age. From what my mother tells me, I started drawing and doodling when I was maybe 3 years old. I guess I've always doodled to some extent, always sketched and drawn in some way, but I've never, until fairly recently, 8 years ago, I never really took it seriously as a way to make a living.
Right.
When I first started, actually the first drawing that I can remember doing was a piece of concept art. It was kind of like a triangular car. I don't know if you can even call it a car, but it was a triangle with wheels. And there was wheels on all three corners and on the roof as well. So the idea was that the whole idea was that if the car flipped over, it could continue driving. So that was my first piece of concept.
So, I didn't have any concept in my art for years.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, so I got started like that, and I was just enjoying doing all that. And a lot of my teachers and peers would like my stuff and sort of praise me for it. And I think that was a large part of continuing to do it for a fairly long time before I had to kind of join the real world, I suppose, and think about real career choices.
Right.
Because I come from a very and I think a lot of people out there will be able to relate to this. I come from quite a conservative family. I was brought up in an Asian environment, and I suppose the career choices that are kind of revered in that culture would be things like doctors and lawyers and that type of thing. Those sorts of professions. So art was kind of like, that's cool, but don't think about doing anything like that for a living, because I think my dad actually once said, the only famous artists are the dead ones, and I'm like, okay.
that's encouraging.
Encouraging.
So how was it making that leap, given that your family was like that? I mean, have they received it at this point?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Look, they're very encouraging these days. I still don't think that they 100% really know what I do.
Right.
And I've tried a lot of times to kind of describe what I do, but there's just a fundamental, it's just a generational thing. I don't think they quite understand. But they're happy that I'm able to make a living doing this, and I'm happy as well. So, but I think they always wanted me to try to make a living doing something respectable, I suppose. So I actually went to uni and studied computer science and management.
Mm-hmm.
Very different fields from art making, but I think I took a lot away from them. How to structure my thinking. That has helped me in teaching myself artwork from books and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Cool. I actually studied computer programming for a number of years before I got started as well.
All right.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. What sort of languages do you?
I started out with stuff like C, C++, Java, all that sort of stuff. I used to want to be a game programmer, so I would make little video game projects for all my classes. Just a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it's quite a big change, but in programming there's a lot of creativity as well, I think.
Yeah. It's all about problem solving, so it's a lot of similarities to concepting.
Yeah, did you ever do anything to do with like artificial? I guess you would have, but artificial intelligence.
Very rudimentary. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think I did a little bit, and I was so excited because I was like, oh, this is sort of like something creative, and it ended up just being search algorithms. And I'm like, oh my god, it was like I found it so boring.
Yeah.
The very first lesson, or the very first lecture that they gave us, they had, they played video clips of the Terminator and RoboCop, and these little drones on in space. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna be fantastic. And the whole semester was just search algorithms. I'm like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, that's pretty awful. And so from that point, I guess you decided to be an artist. So when was it that you sort of made that decision that you're going to go down this other path and try to make a career out of this?
Yeah, well, it was I finished with computer science
Mhm.
and management. It was a dual degree, so I was doing sort of like business type subjects as well as computer science, and I finished that in 2003,
Okay.
and went out there into the real world and worked a few different types of jobs, but I think maybe two or three different jobs before finding out about concept art. These other jobs, I tried to be enthusiastic about them, but after a few months, I'd be like, oh, this isn't really for me.
Yeah.
And I came across concept art. I think accidentally stumbled across it by at the time I think it was called CG Talk. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if yeah
Oh, yeah.
the CG forums.
Yeah.
Uh, I think these days it's called CG Society,
Right.
and it's funny because one of the co-founders for that website was Leonard, and I actually went to uni with him and did programming with him, and I remember him mentioning something like he was working on this artist type community, but he never really went any further with it. And then a few years later, I found out that he was one of the founders of this whole thing, and Ballistic Publishing and all that. And I was like, wow, this is kind of it's really small world, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really exciting to sort of learn about that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, did I get off point there?
No. This is interesting. I had no idea you knew the founder of CG Society so well. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't really know him that well. We did a few programming
Yeah.
things together, but it was just cool, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild connection to make.
Yeah.
So as far as learning your art skills, since you didn't go to art school, were you mainly learning from books or classes or just self-teaching?
Well,
Because it's a question a
uh,
lot of students wonder, like, how do they get the skills? I mean, do they go to art school?
yeah,
Do they not go?
yeah. Well, look, I think the answer is that you can do both. There's ample evidence from both camps that you can become a really good artist, either going to school or not going to school.
Right.
These days, I feel it's a lot easier. Even back in 2004, I think I was still actually on dial-up. Online schooling was pretty much an impossibility because the internet was so slow. These days, it's a lot better because bandwidth has opened up a little bit, and it makes either downloading videos from schools like the Gnome Online School or their videos. They're making it a lot cheaper as
Yeah.
well. So there's it's much of a muchness, and it really depends on people's personalities. I
Yeah.
think for myself, I didn't get to go to art school, not because I didn't want to, but because the means of being able to do so didn't exist
Right.
for me at the time. Um, uh, I looked pretty hard in the state that I was in. I lived in South Australia,
Hmm.
Adelaide at the time, which is a very small place. There's only a few million people there.
Yeah.
So firstly, there wasn't an industry big enough to kind of support the courses and the university degrees for people to go there and study, um, uh, computer games and that sort of thing.
Right.
Because if they came out, it's very unlikely that they were going to get a job.
Yeah.
So I tried to look for something to do in gaming. I originally wanted to be like a 3D artist,
Uh-huh.
and then I tried to look for illustration, but there just really wasn't anything that could teach me what I sort of wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Had to look at possibly online school, but at the
Hmm.
time it was really, I found it really expensive.
Mm.
And I was working a job where I was getting paid maybe $30,000 a year, and a lot of that was taxed. So I wasn't making a huge amount of money either.
Right.
Uh, so paying for art school, I thought, that's a little bit expensive.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I'll try to learn myself. And I just started buying Nomon DVDs. I think Scott Robertson's DVDs,
Hmm.
and thank you. So I grew up looking at those guys, going, these are the guys that I really love,
Right.
and I really want to follow and do sort of the things that they do. Um, and yeah, I just went from there. I just tried to teach myself little by little. I had no idea what I didn't know. There's that
Right.
unconscious. I had no idea that it was such a massive field with so many different areas of being able to get into. I was just having fun
Yeah.
at the time, um, and yeah, just doing it from there. And I was just lucky enough to eventually score a job doing concept art relatively quickly after I decided to do that. So I think I started trying to teach myself around 2004, and I was doing that pretty hardcore for about 6 months before coming across an opportunity to work with someone doing concept art. After 6 months of doing that, yeah.
Wow.
So
That's really fast. I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
I guess you had been drawing and painting for a while though before then, of course. Um,
I wouldn't say with any degree of you know precision. Like I didn't set out to become a better artist in
right.
any ways, and most of the time, like when I was doing my uni, I think I'd be drawing maybe 2 or 3 times a year, doing full pictures.
Oh wow.
But looking back on them, they're very rudimentary,
Yeah.
very rudimentary stuff, and lacking a lot of fundamentals. But I thought it was just for fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't about getting better at artwork.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I actually got that job was because those people didn't have any idea what a good artist was, and they were kind of like, um, so I got my first break, I suppose, in a sense, because of incompetence on their behalf. They had no idea what to look for, and
Right.
I was able to con my way in, I guess.
Well, that worked out well for you. But returning to kind of how you taught yourself, I think it's a good point that these days it's very easy to learn online. Like stuff like
Mm,
Gnomon and stuff have made learning online so much easier than it used to be.
yeah.
There's just so much information out there. Um,
Yeah. I think there is something to be said about the lowering of barriers, though, because it's a little bit easier. I think the perception for a lot of younger artists is that there's a huge amount of competition as well,
mhm.
because these barriers have been lowered.
Right.
More people are able to try to do it, and as a result, you just see an explosion in the number of people who are doing this sort of thing. And
Yeah.
I guess it can be scary for people just starting out when they see just the number of people that are doing this sort of thing these days.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you think the same thing, but
Oh, definitely. It's staggering how many people are doing it these days, and it always seems to happen that I'll run across some really good artist cranking out
yeah,
amazing stuff, and I've never heard of them before.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
I try to keep up to date with like what people are doing, but sometimes an
yeah,
artist will just come out of nowhere and they'll just be amazing, and it makes you
yeah,
appreciate that just how many people are out there doing really good work. Um,
yeah, yeah. It's really really cool. As I said, it can feel a little bit daunting as well,
yeah.
being able to look at these people and going, "Holy crap! I've got to measure up to these guys," and
Oh,
sort
definitely.
of.
It's a scary field because we all feel like, oh my god, that other guy's doing something amazing. Now I need to
Yeah,
step it up myself.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to just say, so with that getting that job, I was going to say, a lot of the time, opportunity comes to us in ways that you have no idea where the opportunities are going to come for. So working hard and being prepared to take those opportunities, in my opinion, is a very wise thing to do. preparing yourself to take advantage of them. When I actually came across that opportunity, it was in the most obtuse way, and it's weird because a lot of my client work now has come to me in very very weird ways as well. But in that case, I got my first studio job because I was working in a health food store. Selling, like protein powders and bodybuilding supplements and stuff like that. I was into that scene for a little while, and a guy came in. He was the guy that would eventually be my boss, and he was coming in because he wanted to kind of bulk up. He was feeling, I need to start working out and stuff, and we got chatting about that. And I don't know how it happened, but it turned on to the fact that he was starting a games company. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I've always been a bit of a hustler. So I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to talk about how I like doing all this sort of stuff, and maybe I'll be able to send something to him. So I was chatting to him, and just coincidentally, I was actually by myself in the health food place that day, and just behind. In the back room, I was actually sitting and reading one of Scott Robertson's books. I think it was a concept design book that he released. Did you ever see that? It was one of those two cool hovercrafts and just above water.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love that book. It's still one of my favorites. And anyway, I was looking at, and and I actually, when I was talking to the guy, I said, I can do this concept art. And he was like, oh, really? And then we got chatting about it, and I actually ran to the back, picked up Scott Robertson's book, brought it to the front, and said, you see all this stuff? I can do this stuff. And he was like, oh, that's really cool. So I kind of, Scott Robertson wittingly helped me get a job in the industry. So
oh, that's great.
So that night I actually, sorry.
No. Go
on. So that I actually went home and just drew a picture. I'd not painted for a while. I was still studying a lot of fundamentals, but I thought, oh look, I've got to do something for this guy because he said to send something through.
Yeah.
And I sent it through to him, and he wanted to meet up, and we actually met up at his place the next day, the next night. We're talking video games and his idea of what he wanted to do, and I thought it was kind of a cool idea and everything. I think it was a gladiator game or something.
Yeah.
But I get to draw cool stuff. So I somehow found my way into this company because he didn't really know what to look for, and he thought, well, this guy's kind of got the skills that I'd like for this thing, and we actually ended up, because he was Middle Eastern, so we actually ended up smoking shisha. That Middle Eastern tobacco. Yeah, we were doing that all night and playing Gran Turismo for the whole night. So that was how I got into the games industry.
Wow, that's a very unique story. I can't say a lot of people would have the same experience, but it's fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, with your experience, I mean, what advice do you give to other people trying to start out? I mean, is it hope for a chance encounter like this, or try something different?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure any a lot of other people would be in a position to sort of enter the industry like that. I think it was a pretty big fluke to get in like that.
Right.
But as I said before, I think just always doing your studies, reading the forums and educating yourself about the industry, about where you might possibly get more opportunities. I'll plug your book, the Art of Freelancing. I thought was a great, easy to listen to condensation of a lot of that knowledge. Business books in general on illustration and that type of thing.
Yeah.
I always read those sorts of books because it really opens your mind up to the breadth of opportunity. Like I say this pretty often, but it's not opportunity that's scarce. It's our ability to meet those opportunities and the ability to spot them that I think are a little bit more rare than opportunity itself.
Yeah, so, I definitely agree. There is a lot of work out there. There's a lot of jobs out there. There's a lot of chance for people.
Yeah, I think the flip side of that as well is that although there's a lot of work out there, there's not I think there's still a lack of the type of skill that employers and people who can commission artwork, there's a lack of the skill that they need, um, because of I think because of publications like Imagine Effects, which are fantastic, but
Mhm.
they tend to show work that's a bit more rendered and a bit more
Right.
finished, and well, and sometimes also a bit sketchier,
Yeah.
and not quite as defined in terms of details. A
Hmm.
lot of artists tend to think that's the way that everyone wants you to paint. Or design stuff, and I've actually found that with concept art anyway, a lot of people really want you to be able to just sketch with line work and pencil and that sort of thing, because in concept art it's much more the idea a lot of the time. Well, concept design, a lot of the time it's the idea as opposed to the final rendering of
Right.
something.
Yeah. That's
Hopefully people distinction between that.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and it's a distinction I think a lot of people miss out on because
Mm.
there is a large difference between doing concept work and doing illustration work. Like my portfolio is mainly my illustration work, and that's
Yep,
what I
yep.
show off, and so I still get concept art gigs even though I'm showing off illustration stuff, but my concept work looks entirely different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
Well,
again,
I think
it's all about the idea. So
yeah, yeah. I think it's there's definitely like a lot of your the images that you publish, I feel are very good for say setting the mood.
right,
Uh, there's a huge amount of work for that as well, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff where it really is quite a lot more rudimentary than that, which is really just line work and that.
yeah,
And I think human nature likes to kind of go, well, I want to show my best stuff off, and often our best stuff is not the line work, which we look at and go, oh, that's kind of
yeah.
not nice to look at. And even if you don't post it, people won't kind of appreciate it in the same way that someone's going to appreciate a fully painted image.
Yeah,
Um, so they'll ignore that and go, oh, well, I'll look at this cool stuff instead. When what they're really being given is an inside look at the industry. It's like, hey, this is actually 80% of the work
yeah,
that you're probably going to be doing, which is quite a lot more sketchy, I suppose.
yeah, and a lot more like boring stuff. Like, I mean, I do building facades sometimes. It's not
Yeah,
fun. They don't look cool.
yeah,
They're just
yeah.
okay. Here's a little architectural detail.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So what you see is people's A games, or their war face all the time. It's like the best stuff that they can put out there, and that's the
Right.
stuff that's going to be publicized around.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a lot to be said for just being able to do good work with just outlines and pencil and not even tone work half the time.
Yeah.
Uh, and what you were saying about doing stuff that isn't all that interesting. The reality is, if you enter something like the video game industry, you'll often be doing stuff that you don't care that much about. At least initially, when I first, for the first 3-4 years of my career, I was working on stuff that I was like, I'm not really a sports person, but I was working on car racing games and
Right.
and sports games and you might get stuck for for a couple of years working on My Little Pony, and you might, someone who loves Gears of War. It's
Yeah.
completely at just with what you like, but if that's what's being called for, that's what you have to, I suppose, shovel your skill into. And I think the mark of a professional is being able to get into a frame of mind where you're passionate about something that you're not passionate about, if that
Right.
makes any sense.
No, it
Um,
definitely does. There's something to be said about finding something you enjoy, even in assignments that you really don't enjoy.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
mean, I've
exactly.
again, like some of my concept gigs, I've done like little kids games, and I've had to paint candy before, and it's just like not fun stuff. I mean, you gotta look at my portfolio; it's all this cool, epic stuff, and then I get like assignments to paint candy, and a lot of the reality of concept gigs is that they're not always really cool. Um,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I think that's a
And
good point.
yeah, and I mean, for me anyway, the secret has always been to, say with car racing. I'm not a real car head, but I can appreciate it as as something that people have a lot of passion for.
Right.
And I think attaching myself to that passion, finding out what people find really exciting about this particular field, allows me to feel some of that excitement for it as well, and therefore allows me to do a better job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. So you got your first gig in a very strange sort of way. And how long did you stay at that company?
I think I stayed with that company for, I think, a couple of years. I'm pretty sure it's a couple of years. And originally, when I first started, it was I was working part-time with them because they didn't have much funding. I was getting paid maybe $300 a week.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, if you add that up, that's a lot of money at all.
No.
And so I had to work this other job to help, save money as well. Because I also thought, well, they're really small. They've never done anything. They might not last very long. So I wanted to hedge my bets and sort of work a couple of weeks at my old job. And I just told my old employer, look, I'm going to go back and study. I think it was industrial design or something. And that's cool.
Yeah.
Just to cover my tracks for a little bit. But
Right.
I worked with this company for about 3 months before I thought, look, I'm just going to take a risk and work with them full time. And so after a couple of months, I gave my old employer, in the health food shop, my notice and jumped into this role full time for no more money. So I was basically, for the first maybe the first year of working with this company, I was making I think it was 16 grand a year.
Wow. And you can live off of that?
Sorry?
And you could live off of that at the time?
Look, I couldn't because I had to, because I was still staying with my parents.
Gotcha.
And that was part of the reason that I thought, look, I'm going to take this chance.
Yeah.
Because if I lose this job, at least Mum will still be able to feed me for a little while.
It is nice having that safety net there.
Exactly. And I'm lucky to have been able to have that. So in a way, they did support me in that. They were still very very kind of worried when I resigned from the other job and went this full time. But my thinking was, I can't kind of be half in and half out. If I want to get better at this craft at my job, I'm gonna have to do it 100% of the time. Art isn't something that you accidentally get better or hope you get better. You have to put for me, and I'm sure you know this as well, but for those listeners who are wanting to get into the industry, it has to be a lifestyle, and it's something you have to embrace. You have to live and breathe it in order to get better. Because that keeps your mind open to new ideas and new ways of thinking. And I think that's really important for the longevity of your career. I'm still like that these days. I love just finding out new things, finding out how other people do things. And I think that's a large part of why I improved relatively quickly with this company. So yeah, I was getting paid $300 a week, but for me, I was getting paid to draw swords and armor and stuff like that. And I thought, I had to pinch myself some days to think, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. I felt like a complete fraud.
Yeah.
I had, because I was self-taught, I had no credentials. I just thought, oh God, one day they're going to find out that I can't do perspective and they're going to fire me. And that whole idea of thinking, oh, I'm a fraud, that stayed with me for a fairly long time.
Oh yeah, I still get that feeling from time to time.
And it can be, you sometimes have this bit of existential crisis. I mean, oh God, someone's gonna pop out of that closet over there on the wall and say you're a fraud, and then go back to the real world.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 4 years into my career of doing it full time that I thought, okay, maybe I'm not a fraud. Maybe I can actually start to enjoy this a little bit and not be afraid of the man in the closet who's going to jump out and yell at me.
Yeah. So, you started in-house, and then I guess you bounced to a couple other in-house jobs. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Over the course of 4, 5, maybe 4+ years, I actually went to quite a few companies. There's this running joke that I'm a bit of a corporate black widow. Every time I join a company, it closes within 6 months. Um,
Nice.
there was yeah, the last two companies that I actually joined. They were relatively large and stable. They've been around for more than 10 years each. And when I joined them, within 6 months, they shut down. And this was in the middle of the kind of global financial crisis
Right.
and the fallout of that. So I think all up, I've been maybe in seven. I lose count, but I think it's like seven different companies. Yeah, I think I've been in 7 different companies.
Wow.
So I've been through the interview process 7+ times, I think.
Jeez. Gotten
Mm,
around.
mm.
I think that is a good thing to mention, though, with all the closing companies, because, I mean, in-house jobs, I mean, you kind of take them because you think you have job security, but it's not
Yeah.
always the case that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on point with that. These days, especially with you know the internet on one hand has been an amazing thing, but on the other hand, it's opened up the global market and allows companies to ship a lot of work offshore these
Right.
days. Whether it's a negative or positive thing, that's up to other people to decide. But the reality is, um, there's a lot of offshore competition, and as a result, it drives down costs for companies. So they're going to move a lot of their operations in. I think we've seen that recently in the last few years, at least. Massive giants that I've grown up with. I mean, just yesterday I was reading LucasArts.
Yeah.
A company that for me, um, uh, Day of the Tentacle and Sam and Max and all these
Yeah.
games. I mean, I grew up with that stuff. And now that company's gone, it's like a piece of you has died. Um, and yeah, if these massive companies that have been around for so long and must have learned so much along the way can shut down. Uh, Another one was culling of jobs from DreamWorks, one of my all-time favorite
Hmm.
studios that stuff that I love. Um, if they have to bow down to these international pressures, or these financial pressures, what does that say about the smaller companies?
Right.
Uh, and yeah, studio jobs. There is this idea that it's a lot more stable, but I've actually found, from my experience, that freelancing has actually given me the stability that I've never had from a studio job,
Huh.
which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So,
Mm.
about what time did you make the leap to freelancing, and how did that come about, and how was it making that transition?
Yeah, it was probably about 4 years ago now.
Hmm.
About 2009, I was working for a video game company here in Melbourne. They actually just relocated me maybe about 6 months prior to that. So I was working on a few titles with them. One of them was a fighter plane game, air combat sort of game.
Hmm.
And also working on a cricket game for Codemasters. I think there was 3 separate projects that were happening in house, and I was moving between all the different teams because I had enough skill set to try to help all of them, and that company uh, had been around for 10 years, so over a decade, and I thought it was going to be a very stable company, and they were. Uh, then they hit hard times. They had a series of layoffs. I think half the company was gone, and then about a month after that, the rest of us were let go. This was about the third time that uh, you know I've been in this situation quite a few times, and I thought I've got to get work as fast as possible because I knew that in Melbourne there were very very few jobs for concept artists, um, and I thought, look, I've got to hustle and try to get work wherever I can as quickly as possible, and I started just reaching out to old contacts in that immediately. And was lucky enough to get in with a new client, with a new relatively large client, the week after being laid off. and that's never sort of happened before. But I think a large part of it was just I was hustling
Yeah.
and doing a lot of legwork in a very short amount of time. I think I was working just 10-hour days on the weekend, just trying to email as many people as possible and just say, hey, I'm available for freelancing if you have any work available. And I was just lucky enough to be able to get some.
Yeah. Wow,
And
that's really good. It's fast.
yeah, and since then it's just been going really well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
been
like the
going.
freelancing lifestyle?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, there's um, I I think it really depends on people's personalities to a large degree. But for myself, it's perfect. I think of myself as an introvert. I can spend a huge amount of time by myself, and I don't get some people get cabin fever. Um, being by themselves for such long amounts of time, but I actually really enjoy the solitude and the flexibility, the flexibility of how I use my time, of which clients I choose to work with. Um, I can I can wake up whatever time I want as long as I get my work done. My clients don't care.
Right.
And I get to work with great people, and if they stop being great, you can easily kind of move on. Whereas in a studio role, you're kind of stuck with those people until they get fired or you get fired or someone moves on.
Yeah.
And yeah, this. Oh, the other thing is commuting. I don't know if you've ever had to commute for long periods of time
No.
to university or anything like that, but commuting is such a stressful thing, and I didn't realize that until I actually stopped commuting.
Mm.
And doing freelance work, and I think I've probably added maybe another 5-10 years to my life. And it's just so great not having to drive to work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot of positive things for me anyway. I mean, how about yourself? What would you say?
I mean,
You love about
I haven't done the in-house thing. I've
Yeah.
only been freelance. I started out freelance and have stuck with it so far. But I will say that every time I get offered an in-house job, which a few companies have thrown at me, just when I start thinking about the idea of going somewhere 5 days a week and working, 10-hour days or whatever, I get terrified. I'm like, I don't want to go to work that much. I like just kind of sitting around my house and painting. It's fun. So,
Yeah.
and then like I ask them like, can I take like a 2-month vacation at any point to travel? They just kind of look at me weird. So I don't know. I love the freelancing thing. It's worked out very well for me.
Yeah, they probably just look at you and go, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very.
So,
Yeah, as I said, I don't like to say that freelancing is perfect for everyone. I think that there has to be a certain type of individual, certain sort of mindset uh, that you have to have, or at least a certain number of traits you need to
yeah.
have in order to successfully freelance. And one of them is just being alone for long periods of time. Another is understanding that you're the captain of your own ship. Um, and it sounds silly, but a lot of people uh, don't realize it, but they actually do better in an environment where someone else is telling you what to do.
Yeah.
It's weird, but when you give someone, it's like a blank piece of paper. When you start drawing, it can sometimes be the scariest thing because you've got so many different options. And if you're not working to a brief, it's even worse because it's like, oh man, what do I draw today, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people flourish under guidelines and a set direction. So being captain of your own ship can be very scary in its own ways because suddenly you've got no one else to blame for any shortcomings, any failures. They're all on you, and that means that the onus is on you to get educated in whatever ways you can, and and working hard as well. A lot of freelancers work from home, and I know plenty of people who say, I don't know how you do it. I get distracted by so many things. So you need a lot of discipline, I think, as
Yeah.
well, to be able to do it well. Otherwise, you could easily spend the whole day, and I have sometimes. I sometimes just veg out for the whole day, and play a video game or
Oh, yeah.
sit down and watch a whole season of Breaking Bad or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's very easy. It's a really easy trap to fall into if you're not mindful of how you're spending your time. I'm not sure if you find that yourself.
No,
But that's
definitely. And it does require a certain personality. Like, again, I think we both enjoy just being alone, and we both just enjoy doing what we want to do, and we have the
Yep.
motivation to do, our work on time and everything. But
Yeah.
I will say there are a lot of people that I think will do better in that in-house experience of, all right, got to go to
Yep.
work. We're at work now, and let's get
Yep.
told what to do and have someone direct us.
Yeah.
So I do definitely agree that there are pros and cons to both, and some people probably are better off just doing the in-house thing. But
Mm.
at least for us, I will take the freelancing.
Yeah.
So talking about freelancing for you, the internet has obviously helped all of us a lot because, I mean, hell, we wouldn't be doing this without the internet. But how
Yep.
has it
Yep.
been working in Australia? Because there's not quite as many game companies down there as we've got here in the States or in Europe. How has
Yep.
that been getting work? Do you work mainly for Australian clients? Do you work internationally? What's that been like?
Yeah, it's a bit of it's definitely an interesting question, because my reality of freelancing is probably quite different from yours. As I was telling you the other day, with regards to cons or conventions, comic conventions, and that sort of thing, those things aren't really that big over here in comparison to the ones in the United States, and really probably aren't that great for sourcing out work. So over here in Australia, I've had to look in slightly different fields that I probably would have in the United States. I think there's, even though the internet is great for a lot of things now, I still find that there is a lot to be said for being able to say something face to face, meet with someone face to face. I mean, 70% of communication is body language, right? And a large part of getting new clients is getting them to trust you, and it's harder to do if you're not able to see someone face to face. So some of my clients are from Australia, but and they came about actually because I actually worked in house with one of my major clients now, as he was my manager, and then we both left the company due to because we were made redundant. But then they started their little operation, and I've kind of picked up the work from them. So that was through originally face to face, but then there's other work that I've gotten through Facebook. I actually get a lot more work through Facebook than say LinkedIn, which is the whole professional network thing.
Right.
Either through someone seeing sketches of mine, or mostly it is just posting lots of sketches, and when someone likes something, it goes on to someone else who sees it and they kind of like it, and then they might go, oh, I want to get this guy to do some work for me.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest clients now came in the most strange way. Like one of my cousins that I haven't seen for such a long time, I added her on Facebook just to say hello and that. And I had a lot of artists on my list at the time already, so I started, I was posting artwork for them, and my cousin used to go out with someone who started a film production company, and this person was looking for concept artists, and my cousin liked my work, and she forwarded on my stuff to him, and then he got in contact with me, and I thought, oh yeah, whatever, this is going to be another one of those things where it sounds better than it is, but we've been together now for 2 years, and they're my biggest client. So as I said, opportunities come to you from the weirdest of places, and it's up to you really to just to take advantage of them as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It is a lot of just putting your stuff out there and just doing it again and again, and random people will see it. You never know who's going to check out your art and like it and follow up with you. Like, I mean, I put my stuff on Reddit one time and got an email from somebody who writes for Forbes the next week that wanted to do an article on it. So you never know where those connections are going to happen.
Yeah, because you got you had an article in Forbes, didn't you?
Yeah, I got written
Yeah,
up in Forbes, which I mean I never even thought about getting written up in Forbes.
yeah,
It just
that,
never crossed my
that's great.
mind. But
Yeah,
all of a sudden, I had a guy contacting me. So those weird happenstance connections,
yeah,
I think are really important. And obviously,
yeah,
get the skills first, where your art's impressive, but then just keep putting it out there.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think definitely marketing is such an important thing. And look, in general, I think communication skills are very important. I've worked with a lot of artists in house, and from what I've noticed, a lot of artists don't communicate that well. And I think a large part of it is just being a decent communicator.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and work on your speaking skills, work on your email skills. These things will pay massive dividends down the line. I think so.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree. I can't tell you how many emails I get from people who cannot write a sentence at all.
Mm,
And,
mm.
they're asking me for advice on how to be an artist. And I just want to tell them, like, learn how to write a good email. And,
Yeah,
I hate to
yeah,
break it to you, but that advice would be really, really useful.
yeah,
Because, I mean, if you shoot an art director your stuff and, like, your work looks good, but you can't communicate at all, it's going to be really
yeah.
hard for them to work with you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I suppose as an extension to what you just said, with the being able to write and read properly, with the internet blowing up, and a lot of people in other countries, developing countries, email me and ask, how do I sort of, um, sell my work to different clients and stuff like that. And part of it is actually, I don't know if I'm putting this in a racist way or not, but being able to speak English more clearly is actually going to be a huge benefit for people who aren't in English speaking countries. Yeah, and being able to communicate clearly on that front. I mean, it's completely not an art skill, is it at all? It's a
No.
communication skill, but it allows people to interface to, a lot more clearly. And when you're dealing in something as abstract as bringing other people's ideas to life, uh, being able to communicate is like at the very, very basis of successfully pulling off good concept art. I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Mm.
Somewhat switching tracks here. You are recently married, got a kid on the way. Congratulations
Yep.
on both of those.
Cheers. Thank
Um,
you.
and so, how has that been now that you have other human beings kind of depending on you? Because, I mean, something about freelancing that's kind of scary is that, if you screw up, it's just your life.
Yeah.
At least that's where I'm at right now. But,
Hey.
having other people depending on you, how is that?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day, and for me anyway, it feels like everything's kind of lined up. Um, well, because I feel like I'm at the stage where my freelance career, I'm not having to do as much marketing as I used to. I've got clients that return to me on a very regular basis, so I'm not having to go out there and spruik my work um, as often as I used to,
Mhm.
and so I've got a regularity, almost like I've almost got the regularity of a normal job, but the freedom of freelance. That
Mm,
hopefully that makes sense.
yeah.
So there is. I feel very fortunate that that's the case. So I don't have quite the ups and downs that a lot of beginning freelancers would experience. So having other people depending on me isn't really that scary. It would have been when I first started.
Right.
So I mean, people who have families in there and they want to pursue a freelance career, that's a really challenging thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is a little bit more difficult because I think having dependents forces you to take perhaps actions that aren't always in your best interest in the long term. You might take jobs that doesn't really build your reputation at all, and that type of thing. So I was able to take those risks early on, and now that we're having a family, I've kind of established where I want to go with my career. It's going okay, and Kelly and I are really we're quite homebody individuals. We don't go out a heck of a lot. We don't drink and smoke and all that sort of stuff, which could chew up some much needed capital, and we just save like crazy. So we've saved quite a lot of money, and that will tide us over for quite a while. Even if no new jobs come in, we'll be pretty secure for a little while. So that takes away a little bit of the stress. I sound like a complete grandpa when I say this, but for people who are looking at doing freelancing, and making a proper go of it, sometimes it's going to take a really long time to get to the place of sufficiency. That is, your business is able to pay for itself, and so save all your money. Don't try not to blow it on stuff. It's very easy to save. You get a $2,000 paycheck for an illustration or something. It's really easy to go, I'm going to buy myself a new big screen TV or something. And it's like, well, until you've gotten to the stage where your freelance career can support itself, maybe after it could take a couple of years, 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Try to resist that temptation, because that could be setting you up for failure if you're under financed, I suppose, because there's going to be lean times, and you need to have backup money to be able to ride them out. Because if you don't, I think a large part of freelancing successfully comes from being able to weather the storms and keep building that reputation and keep building those, putting those clients in the pipe that might not come around for a while, but keep being able to do that. If you go back to a full-time job, all of that goes away, and then if you want to do freelancing again, you have to start from the same, from the beginning.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. But I think you bring up a good point with the finances, and it's something I guess a lot of people don't talk about, and it's really, really important. Especially with freelancing, I think having that buffer of savings is super important. For instance, what's that?
Sorry, do you sort of do that yourself as well?
Oh yeah.
I'd imagine you do.
Oh yeah, I've got healthy savings that I can live off of for a while without hurting. And I've made sure to do that because it is a little terrifying, and sometimes money just with freelancing doesn't come in. My old story is that last year during January, I had $0 come into my account. Even though I was working full time, I had no money actually arrive in my bank account. So I was just living off of what I already had in there. So it's kind of scary.
And you touch on an important point as well, which is cash flow. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later, but cash flow is something that people need to think about as well. Profitability is good, but if you don't get paid for 6 months, you might have billings of $50,000 or $10,000 or whatever amount. But if you don't see that for 10 months, can you kind of survive if your payment's been drawn out? I think this is like an invisible problem that sometimes people don't think enough about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I used to keep really good track of this, but I've paid less attention to it lately. But I mean, it's not uncommon to have people owe you $10,000 for work that's already done. And just it hasn't been paid yet, and it will probably be paid eventually, but sometimes it takes a long time.
And it really depends on which industry you pursue as well. I mean, some of them are just notorious for dragging out payments.
I mean, I had a well-known client that paid me, I think, usually about a year after I finished the jobs.
Wow.
And it was awful, but thankfully that was one of my first jobs, and I no longer work for them. It does get a little easier. Now, I guess we can talk about pricing and whatnot. So in general, for your freelance work, do you charge by the hour or by the project?
I charge by project, but I figure out that project cost based on an hourly rate.
Right.
I make an estimate of how long it's going to take, and then I put that into like a quote for clients, and they'll either say yay or nay. They don't generally need to know what my hourly charge is, and I used to tell people or the clients what my hourly charge was, but I found it was redundant information, and also there's a negative mental thing where if and it makes absolutely no sense, but sometimes the person commissioning the work will say, this guy's making a ton of money, he's making more money than I am,
Right.
per hour for this job. That's too much, even though it makes absolutely no sense, because that person's in a full-time role. They
Right.
have benefits, and they have expenses taken care of. I mean, we have to take care of our own training expenses, overheads, equipment. That's not stuff that comes into their mind when they're thinking, this guy's getting paid more per hour than I am. And so, and the other thing as well is, so they might be reticent to contract you to do the work, and they will go to someone a little bit cheaper because of the whole mentality that they shouldn't be paid more than me.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that for their budgets, it's no good to have an open-ended figure like an hourly rate. Accountants will be screaming at you, going, "What the hell are you talking about?" It's useful to have just a set figure, so they can measure it against their set figure and say, "Well, yes, no, whatever."
Yeah, I have had pretty much the same experience. I think I did one job that was maybe hourly, but aside from that, it's all been per project. And I totally agree with you about not telling people your hourly rate, because it's totally true that when people hear a freelancer's hourly rate, they think we live like kings. Because usually, I'm not sure what your rate is, but it's usually pretty high. And I guess the thing that most people don't know is that if you're freelancing, you can effectively cut your hourly rate in half, and that's about what you'd make in-house for the same work.
It's a good rule of thumb.
Just because all the overhead we have to take care of usually adds up to enough that we have to double our rates to handle all that.
Absolutely. Our own health insurance, our own over here in Australia, we've got something called superannuation. I'm not sure if you've got like 401k or something like that. It's like a forced savings for retirement. You've got to take care of all of that.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are taken care of by employers if you're an employee.
Here we even have self-employment tax, so we get extra tax just for being self-employed.
Really?
It's wonderful. They take even more money just because we don't work for a company.
That's crazy.
It is.
That doesn't sound very nice.
No, it's not. We don't have the greatest taxes. I hear the taxes over there are a little bit better. My brother's actually working over there right now, so.
Are you a company or considered a sole trader? Or
I'm a sole proprietorship, so I am registered as a business, but I'm sort of a one-person entity.
Sure.
I know.
Are you?
Sorry, what?
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was going to ask, with companies, I'm actually looking at switching my business over to a company structure because they get taxed differently.
Right.
I'm not sure if they do that in the US as well, but if it's in a company, do they get taxed a little bit differently as well over in the US?
Yeah, it'll definitely be a different tax structure for that. Some people will form LLCs and some will actually incorporate themselves. I haven't quite found enough justification to go through the trouble of doing that. Just because it hasn't made enough sense to me. Like, the main reason I see a lot of people do it is to decrease their liability. But frankly, I don't see a lot of liability in our field.
No.
The worst thing we can do is do a bad painting, which nobody's going to die. So.
Okay. Well, in Australia, it's a little bit different because I'm thinking of going to a business structure. A company structure, because with personal tax, we're taxed on increasing brackets. So that obviously the higher you earn, the more that you're taxed. Whereas with a company structure, you're actually taxed at a flat rate.
That's nice.
So and like the maximum personal tax is like close to 50% over here.
Wow.
Whereas whereas the top, with companies, you're taxed at a flat 30%, whether you make $1 or $1 million. So there are tax benefits of actually switching to a different structure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is that depending on how you set it up, you can do these things called trusts where they encapsulate the company, and you can take the earnings and separate them out. So say if you earn 100 grand
Right.
from your company doing business, you can actually take that money, split it into two lots of $50,000, and depending on who the trustees are, you can actually allocate that to myself and my wife, for instance, and you'll be taxed at your individual rate. So it kind of works out better.
Oh, that is nice.
Yeah, so there's these levels of complexity, I suppose, that you sort of want to work up to.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, I'm actually opening up some new retirement accounts so that I can sort of almost defer income. So lower your annual tax rate, just because it's nice to be able to hide that money away from the government in a perfectly legal way.
So you're basically, are you talking about 401k sort of retirement?
Similar. I think what I'm opening is a SEP IRA, which is a sort of self-employment IRA that you can put up to I think it's 50 grand in the account each year. And I think it comes out pre-tax, so you can effectively, if you make a little bit too much money one year, you can try to get to a lower tax bracket by shuffling money in there, which will be nice.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And anyone listening, if you're ever wanting, if you're ever at the stage of doing this sort of thing, I highly recommend speaking to a tax accountant on how to to minimize your tax if you're ever fortunate enough to be in that sort of case.
It is a good thing to get an accountant. I would recommend it for a lot of artists, unless you're really motivated and you feel like learning all this stuff. It wouldn't hurt to go get an accountant. They're not going to charge you that much money, and they're probably going to save you a lot of money. So
I agree. I definitely think that they might seem like they're a lot of money. I mean, I employed an accountant to help me with some things, and he was charging like $200 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing was, he could give me in that hour more than I could figure out for myself in that hour.
Right.
So it kind of shortcut things. I think there are ways to save money, but trying to figuring everything out on your own is probably a bit of a false savings in that case. So
no, I totally agree, and there are things I will happily pay someone else to do. This year, I'm still doing my own taxes for now, but I could see in the next year or two switching to get an accountant to at least do some of it. It does get really complicated really fast.
Yeah, it does. And I did my accounts for the greater part of the last 4 years as well. I always use like a tax accountant, or there's companies like H&R Block where they'll do your tax returns for you if it's complicated. And I'm happy to pay them to do that. That's perfectly fine. But I've also started just last year, and it was scary for me because I don't know about you, but I used to keep very solid books. Every month I'd sit down with my receipts and everything and record all my stuff for the government, for my financial obligations. And it took me a really long time. I'm not sure how long it takes you, but for me, it could take a whole day, kind of making sure all the amounts tallied up and stuff like that. And it would take it'd take a long time, and it's not exactly a passion of mine. So once I got to a certain stage of my income being above a certain amount, I handed that role function off to a bookkeeper, so I don't do my accounts anymore. I get like a bookkeeper every month. They do it on an ongoing basis, but they lodge all my tax returns, all that stuff. I don't have to think about that anymore. It frees up a huge amount of time for me to go off and do stuff that I actually care about. So
I think that's a good thing, and I think a lot of artists should probably do that. So
I mean, for myself, it costs what, $250 a month to do that, and it might sound like a lot of money to starting freelancers, and it probably is. But once you get up to a certain stage, that money, that money being paid to that, it's better that you do that and free up your time, because your time is more valuable.
The more time you can spend on your work, the better off you are. Now, a lot of people, when they're starting out, struggle a lot with pricing and finances and whatnot. Now, how did
Yeah.
you come up with your rates at first? I mean, were you basing it on what you had been making in-house and sort of rolled that into your new hourly rate, or what?
Yeah, for me, it's always been about, it's been a bit of a, determining your rates can be a bit of a, it's a complex interplay between numerous um, aspects of things. Someone asked me this the other day, and I decided to write down some notes. Um, and it's an interplay between your reputation, your reputation in the industry, between the experience that you have, being both a freelancer and an experienced artist. It's important to also know the general market rates for what are people paying in general for the type of work that you're doing. Um, uh, Another point is how convincing you are as at establishing what your rate should be. It's basic salesmanship, figuring out the client's budget, and also having a baseline knowledge of your operations overheads, or how expensive it is for you to run your business every year. What are the fixed costs that you know that you're gonna have to pay, all your bills and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, so uh, for freelancing, how I figured out my rates is that I first started with a baseline understanding of my overheads. So say if you have, say my rough idea of overheads for the year is $20,000. So that's paying for my mortgage, paying for electricity bills and gas bills and food and all this sort of stuff, as well as factoring in savings. If it's around 20 grand, then I would look at splitting this into. Now this is going to be a bit of maths. So what I'll do is I'll actually send this to you later, so you can hand it out to people.
Yeah.
But what you want to do is split that overhead for the whole year into the number of working weeks. So assume that you work for 48 weeks, and assume 4 weeks for holidays, which is equivalent to what full-time workers get in Australia. You get about 4 weeks off per year to paid leave. So if you assume 48 weeks, then that means that per work week, you need to make or bill a minimum of $416. That's what I worked it out. So $20,000 divided by 48 weeks equals $416. So you know that for a week, if you figure out how many hours that you can say are billable hours, say if you assume 30 hours, okay, and then the rest of your time you use it for administration or whatever else. Right. So 30 hours you're having as billable hours. You split that $416 into billable hours, and that's how you get your kind of hourly break-even point. So if you split that 416 by 30 hours, it equals $13.90 per hour. That's your break-even point. That's the absolute minimum that you can get down to before you start making a loss, assuming obviously that you're flat out and you're billing all your billable hours. Yeah. So that $13.90, that gives you a pretty good starting point. It's like anything above this is margin, and the higher that you can get above this is how much profit you're making. And obviously the better or the further the distance is, the more profit margin you're making, the more you're saving, the better your war chest is to weather difficult times. So I like to start at this very break-even point. It's an easy thing to do, and so once you've got that point, then it's playing into figuring out how much clients have budgeted for this project. Sometimes it's as easy as asking them, what's your budget for a project? And then breaking that up into the number of hours you think it's going to take and comparing that to your break-even cost. Most of the time, it's, if you're dealing with decent clients, it's going to be above your break-even, much higher above your break-even point.
Oh, yeah.
Part of that, being able to charge the top end of their budget is you having that reputation, experience. That's how all that sort of stuff slots in, as well as your salesmanship, and saying this is what you should pay me, this much money. Hopefully that's not too convoluted an answer. But I don't think it was saying charge $40 because that's what the market charging.
Right.
You have to have, I think it's important to have a basis for how much you're charging, as well as the fact that if you're giving something to your client that no one else can give, that should be factored into the equation, and therefore your rate should also reflect that. So if you're able to give something that no one else is able to give, your rate should be much higher than someone else's, right? Because you're not a homogeneous quantity anymore. You're suddenly a limited quantity, and people want to hire you specifically for that skill, and you should be charging in accordance to that. That's my theory of how
definitely.
to get.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of factors that go into establishing price. And I mean, another one that I don't think you mentioned, but also like what the company is. Like, I mean, if it's a really big international company, I will probably charge a little bit more than the small company that's doing like indie games. So
yeah, I agree.
It's worth throwing that in there. But I think your point about them coming to you rather than just you being a random artist is also really important, because I know I have clients that come to me and they want my art, and so I'm much more comfortable charging a pretty high rate for my stuff because of that. I've had a lot of success personally. I don't know how you have, but I increased my rates dramatically after about a year of freelancing and ended up actually getting a lot more work. How have you gone about increasing your rates?
Just on the point that you were saying before, by increasing your rates, that's part of also. There's a lot of it's perception, isn't it? For instance, if you were to give, this might not be a great example, but if you were to sell a Ferrari for 10 grand, people will automatically assume there's something wrong with it, or it's a cheap imitation or something like that.
Right.
Whereas if you charge $250,000 for that same car, that perception is that's the real thing. That's something that's wanted by a lot of people. It's a desirable product, and I think in some ways that would definitely affect clients as well. This guy's the real thing. He's a Ferrari, and it's understandable that he's going to charge this much. It really does affect that perception to a large degree. Sorry, what was the original question before I went off?
I mean, I guess just rates in general and how we're determining them.
Okay. So with I think the question was about increasing rates.
Oh, right. Right.
Like when I was in high school and did my business studies at university, there was the idea of the invisible hand, where there's an equilibrium where supply will meet demand, and the market can sustain you at a certain price and not above that. And I think you mentioned on your art of freelancing that you can usually, for a lot of artists, especially just starting out, you can double your rates and people probably won't even blink an eye.
Right.
But there comes a point at which going too far above the market rates will turn people off and they'll go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any simple way of figuring that out apart from just trying it. And saying, due to whatever reasons you've decided to increase your rates for this year. Usually it's good to incrementally do it rather than just I don't know, like a huge jump. And what I do with a lot of clients is also, before I start working with them, put the point to them that at some point we might have to relook at the rates that I'm charging. And if you're getting lots of work, it's a pretty good indicator that you're probably not charging enough. If you've got huge amounts of backlog, it's a pretty good indicator that that you can start raising your prices a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I've found that the best times for me to raise my prices is when I've got a glut of work, and I say, look, I'm increasing my charges because of this reason, and this reason. And usually, that kind of gives you the confidence as well to be able to do it. Like if you have a fair bit of work, and you say, I need to increase my rates. And usually people or clients don't have too much of an issue with that. I think a large part of it is, some part of it is whether they can afford you or not, but a large part of it is, do they like you, and do they trust you that you're able to do the work and not make them look bad.
Right.
So
I mean, I think that for a lot of clients it's more important than the dollar figure. I think as artists sometimes we freak out and focus on that dollar figure too much, but sometimes with a larger company it's really not that big of an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're working for like say Coca-Cola or something, and you're charging them $1,000 for some simple design, you might think, holy crap, that's a huge amount of money. But for them, like, how much profit do they make a year compared to that? That's like nothing. So
yeah, they do not care at all. So it's just a little drop in the bucket for them. Which is why, like, when I'm working on, again, big projects or advertising campaigns especially, I will intentionally just increase my rates for them, just because I know they have so much money on their hands.
Exactly. I mean, for yourself, like, how did you use a similar process to determine your hourly rate as well, or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, the first few freelance jobs were dirt pay, they were terrible, and I barely made like minimum wage. But once I started getting jobs where I could state my rate and I could ask for a certain amount of money, I definitely did try to figure out, like, okay, how much time is this going to take me? How much would I like to make? And then honestly, I really did force myself to price a lot higher than that number that I came up with. Because I mean, there's enough like weirdness going on and other stuff, bills to pay, and odds are you're not also going to work 40 hours a week, so it's a good idea to increase that hourly rate even more. So I sort of finagled it around and did increase it pretty fast early on. I think I made two jumps of doubling it, and both times it worked out great. But I will say at this point I haven't increased my rates more than a minimal amount in the past 6 to 9 months, just because you do get to a point where it's like, okay, you're at a professional rate, and if you start pushing it higher, even the big companies are gonna kind of get scared off. So
exactly. I think that there's a tapering point off, and it's really and that's how you find it, by increasing your rates until you get to the point where people are starting to. I think there was a great quote in your art of freelancing. Increases the rate where clients are kind of cringing and then they pay it. And I think that's a great kind of litmus test for whereabouts you are. If you're at that point, it's kind of okay. That's a good point to be at.
Yeah, because I find a lot of people go way too far down. So anytime clients hear their rates, they're ecstatic because they're paying like way less than they would be happy to pay them.
Exactly. And I think as a whole, as an industry, that does a lot of injustice to the longevity of how of people making it as a living as well. Because if clients get used to people always discounting, they're gonna kind of expect that. So part of us doing what we do, I mean, I feel pretty strongly about it, is that educating people about, hey, you're better than this. Charge what you should be charging, and that will benefit everyone as well. Because we can make a living at it, we can do good work. Because if we can't make a living at it, then what's the point a lot of the time?
It does really pain me now that I see all these starting out artists charging absolutely nothing for really good work. And I guess now that we're at the point where we got pretty decent careers, you do look back at the beginning artist and you wish they'd start charging a little bit more, just for all of our sakes.
Yeah, look, I think what you were saying before with the small press stuff, being able to charge, having to charge very, very little.
Yeah.
At some stage, I think that makes perfect sense because you're an unknown. unknown quantity. But you have to have I think a line in the sand where you go, okay, once these criteria are met, once I've got this much experience or this much client work under my belt,
Yeah.
I have to start getting to the next level. I think too many people stay in the beginner's mindset for way too long, and then that runs you the risk of also becoming really jaded about the whole industry and saying that no one's giving you a shot in that. It's half of it's because you're asking for it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I mean, I think both of us started out with like really awful paying jobs. I mean, you were making 15 a year for an in-house job, which is pretty darn low. And you know, I did jobs. I mean, my first jobs were like $100 card art, where I'm spending 6 to 8 hours on it, and so making like with emails and whatnot, probably $10 an hour. So, and barely making that. So, thankfully, I make a little more than that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing to keep in mind, though, especially when you're at that stage of your career, or at least at the very early stage of your career, is not thinking so much about the money. I've always tried to have the mentality that at the start of at your career, and even now, knowledge is the stuff that I chase, as opposed to as to hard currency. Currency is great, but chasing more knowledge, chasing projects that push your skills a little bit further. The type of projects where you go, I don't know if I can pull this off, forces you to create new workflows, find out new ways of doing things that has a that you only get this amount of pressure from working on a client job. So it's stepping outside your comfort zone, and I think it's important to do that regularly. Even if you've been in the industry for 20, 30 years, I think it's important to do that. Otherwise, you get stale. You get bored with your work.
Oh, definitely.
It just another job, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I experience the same thing. That if I do too much of the same kind of client work, I get really, really burnt out really fast. And my solution for that has always been to just do personal work. But how do you sort of deal with feeling burnt out? Is it just taking on more challenging jobs?
Part of it is, and also the variety of jobs. I'm pretty lucky because one of my clients, they've always got, because they're a film production company, and they're always pitching new ideas in lots of different genres and stuff like that. I get to work on a huge variety of different types of work. And for me, anyway, that means that I never feel like I'm growing stagnant, because one job might be a bit more graphic design oriented, one might be more cartoon oriented, one might be sci-fi oriented, and a lot of the projects are very, very different. I don't feel like I've even come close to burning out for quite a while. I do a lot of work, but it feels like there's a purpose to all of it. I'm not working as I once did. I'd just be working for the sake of working and trying to make more money. But it feels like there's an end goal that I kind of that I'm working towards. I don't feel like I've come close to burning out any time recently. I did feel like I burnt out maybe 5 years ago. That was when I was an art director at a company creating an MMO, and for various reasons, it just felt like I had enough, and I was looking at actually quitting my career. I was on the verge of just selling all my art books and going off to join the army or something like that. So I actually applied to go to the army, applied to go to the Australian version of the CIA. I went through like interviews for months. Eventually, I was not approved to go ahead, but I was actually making inroads to other career choices.
Wow.
So it was pretty drastic at the time.
And is that just because you were getting sick of art, or was it the industry that was bothering you, or what?
I think it was the people that I'd worked with, and it just left a sour taste in my mouth. And I thought, everyone's like this, but it's not the case. Not everyone is I mean, in the case of this company, there was just a lot of politics and stuff like that. And I just thought I've had enough of politics. And being freelancers, we aren't privy to a lot of that. We just get briefs and we do our work. But in a studio environment, there's a lot of jostling. You know,
Yeah.
I remember one time when I wanted to give up my art directorship, and I was like, you know, I didn't sign up for this. I just want to draw. I just want to draw and do concept art. And one of the other heads in the design department was like, really, you want to give up all this power? And I was like, power? What are you talking about? Like, I'm in this position to be powerful, you know. I just want to be in this position to ship a product and do it well. But yeah, there's a lot of politics, and it gets really tiresome, in my opinion. So I'm not saying all workplaces are like that, but a lot of them are.
Yeah. So it is nice being able to avoid all of that by just sitting in our houses and doing the work.
I find it's because you haven't had the opportunity to work in-house. I've actually found that I'm so much more productive at home. Like I'll get like two days worth of work that I would have done in the studio done in one day at home.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk marketing for a little bit. You sort of discussed it early on of sort of posting your work out there. But what other things do you really suggest artists trying to start out and market themselves to do? I mean, is there things that they can learn by reading books, or what are your suggestions as far as marketing goes?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I don't do that much of it these days. But if I was just starting out again, I would suggest, I used to do quite a lot of marketing. So what you said before with making sure that your product or your artwork anyway is good to begin with, that's a really, really important point. Making sure that your product is good, because if it's no good, all the marketing in the world isn't going to make a difference. Becoming a successful freelancer, I think, is an interplay between having good work and having good marketing as well. And I have this theory that a lot of artists who are decent, really, really decent artists don't make it, not because of their artwork, but because they're not out there marketing themselves enough. I think there's so many different strategies to getting your name out there and getting it seen by people. But I've always preferred the direct marketing sort of idea. So rather than, and it seems a little bit less efficient because with non-direct marketing that I kind of do these days, and I'm sure you do a lot of it as well, is just posting artwork that you've done. So you can see it and in some ways make its way through the vine and seen by art directors, and they kind of commission you. In one way, it's good because you kind of use the power of the internet to get your work seen by many people, but at the same time, it's also more difficult sometimes to stand out in a crowd of a very crowded marketplace, a very crowded visual marketplace. I actually like to approach clients directly. Say if I'm going to a magazine, this is how I got into doing magazine tutorials. I got onto there's different stages of magazine tutorials. So at one of the easiest to get into is just like for us it would probably be like 2D Artist magazine. They release some great stuff. Their pay is comparatively low compared to the print magazines. But it's an easy way to, if you've got decent art, you approach the editor, which you can find on the inside of the cover, and just email them and say, hey, I've got this experience and this experience. I'd like to write tutorials. Would you have any topics that I can write on? And that's how I got my start in it. And once I'd done a few of those, I thought, okay, now I can actually graduate on to the next level, which is the print, editions of say, the official Coral Painter magazine and Advanced Photoshop magazine. Just again, looking at the same thing, contacting the editors. And also having on hand the work that you've done before, because a large part of what they want to know is, can you do the job to these strict deadlines? And so doing it on a smaller basis means that you're not a brand new newbie. You've got proven work before. They can see your writing style. then you're able to go do that. And then when I went into university teaching for a couple of years, I was able to say, because one of the questions was, what sort of teaching experience have you had? And well, I taught it in various sort of VFX studio, tertiary education studios, teaching students, concept art and stuff like that, as well as writing for these well-known publications. And then so I kind of segued into doing the university teaching, which looks great on your resume if you want to do more teaching or have some sort of role in that, which I did and still do. So a lot of it is quite. I mean, when I mention it, people go, "Oh, that's so simple," and it's like, yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at concept art gigs, go onto your favorite concept art artists and have a look at their client lists, and then you have an immediate list of people that contract out concept artists. Whether you get a job with them or not, that's up to whether your art is good enough, or whether you're able to offer them something that current artists who are working for them. Whether you can offer them something that they can't. Then there's say the artists and graphic designers marketplace. Those specialist directories, or the writers marketplace in Australia. You can have a look at lots of different magazines. You can flip through them. You can see if they need any sort of illustration. A lot of it you can do with the news agent for free. And you use LinkedIn or your social networks to find the names of art directors or or creative directors or editors, and then get in touch with them. Most of them are just normal people. That's how I did my direct marketing. It worked. It worked pretty well for me. So
yeah, I've had a very similar experience. I did a lot of that, more so early on. I don't do as much these days, but there is a lot to be said for, okay, what companies can I work for? What companies are other guys working for? Who do I contact? Let's find a list of this, and let's just start sending them my work. And that's, I mean, honestly, you'll probably get work from just doing that. It's not really rocket science. You're just trying to get your art in front of the people that hire it. So
I totally agree. And on that point, I think it's important to say that when I was doing that, because my artwork was at a level that I felt that I could market it, you only have so many hours in a week, and it's important to structure your hours, or how you use your hours, your schedule, to meet the aims of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to make lots of sales, 90% of your time probably shouldn't be spent practicing your artwork. You should be out there selling it. When I had no clients, I spent 100% of the day. I set up a very simple, easy to navigate gallery, and set that up and started researching and emailing and everything for 8-10 hours a day. And you might have to do it for a while, but I mean, it just makes sense, right? I read a book once on old school kind of marketing, and one of the traps that people can fall into is like, my artwork's so good, people are just going to come to me, and it's like, that's really not the case. Have to make a concerted effort to go out there and get your work out there. There was a metric that said, if you make 100 calls and you get one sale, that's good. That's a good day.
Right.
And these days with social networking and all that, and email, it's a lot quicker. But the idea still stands that if you've made like 2, 3, 4 emails and you haven't got anything back, you still got like 95 emails to send maybe. Point. A lot of it is just volume and getting it out there, especially early on. You have to work your butt to get those early breaks, I think.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people fall into the trap that they work really, really hard on their art and get it really good, but I guess they don't realize that they also have to work really, really hard at getting it out there and getting these jobs. It does take similar effort. Like, I know a lot of weeks I will spend just as much time trying to get jobs as I spend on actually doing jobs that I already have. It's not uncommon for that to happen, especially early on.
I mean, when it's almost like when you get that sale, you want to congratulate yourself and you go, yeah, this is really great. But then it's like, oh, hang on, I actually still have to do the work.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh god.
Yeah. It's
Oh well.
it's not a fun realization.
Yeah.
So now that you are freelancing, what does your average week look like? I mean, are you sitting down at the same hours every day? Are you working 40-hour weeks? Do you take weekends off? What does your average week look like?
It's still relatively busy. And if I get on track, just feel free to get me back on it. But uh, one of the things that I like to do is kind of look forward in the industry, look for the writings on the walls, and figure out, I suppose, some way, which way is the industry going. And part of that is looking at the world around us, the industry at large, and reading books on similar industries. And I hate, I don't want to sound like a negative person, but with the advent of the internet, like we were talking about before, with the opening of bandwidth, a lot of the walls that are protecting artists are beginning to fall away. You can sort of see that in Rhythm and Hughes shutting down studios and relocating them elsewhere. Those walls are falling. So international competition is going to become more and more of a reality in our field. And I read a book recently about the end of the typesetting industry in the US, and it has a lot of parallels with what we're seeing right now with the visual effects industries. Skill and experience will hold up as a hurdle to international competition for a while, but eventually they're going to break down. A lot of people say, a lot of companies won't go overseas because of cultural differences. That might save us for maybe 5 to 10 years at the most, and then they're going to be on par with us. When I say us, I mean like developing nations compared to say first nations, and that can understandably cause a lot of stress in people. But what I've been looking at is where is the sustainability in my business model, and I don't know that work for hire, or I don't feel that work for hire is the direction that will ensure long-term sustainability for my business. It is right now, but I can't. But just with the writing on the walls, I can't imagine that being my bread and butter forever.
Yeah.
So I'm working really hard. I'm spending maybe. I don't keep track of how many hours I work, but it's a lot of hours.
Right.
Say maybe from 40 to anywhere from 50 to 60 hours a week, working on lots of different projects.
Right.
At the moment, I'm working on 3 personal projects to bring like an IP to fruition, as well as the book that I'm writing, as well as a product that I'm designing. And this is in part to meet the challenges of increased global competition in the future. I think for developed nations, you're going to see a lot of production work moving offshore.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. There's a lot of people talking about stemming that tide, and I think you might be able to do that for a little while with artificial means. But I think it's eventually going to break down, and those artificial ways of propping up our industry is going to kind of fall away, and there are going to be a lot of people, I think, upset by that. But my idea is to meet those challenges as they come. With the typesetting industry, that was all going to places like India and similar places like that, the Philippines, and what was once a massive industry in the US. You're not going to find anything but sales offices for typesetting companies in the US now, and it is a shame, but I'm not sure that there's anything that people can do to really, for the long term, stem that trend. I'm trying to prepare for that as best as I can, by using whatever means that I can now to shift client or work for hire into creating my own properties and that
Right.
sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to bring up, and that I totally agree with you that the industry is definitely changing, and it's sort of up to us to keep up with where it's going. I know personally that, yeah, I probably could make all of my income just from the freelancing commissions, but I
Mm,
really try to avoid that because I know
mm,
that, at some point either the industry is going to change or work's going to dry up, and I'm going to need other means of sustaining myself. So, at this
yep,
point, I teach, I sell the downloads for a little bit.
yep,
I'm trying to push my prints more, trying to make a good income off of just the print sales, doing conventions, selling there, trying
yep,
to diversify that and being able to make money, just off of personal paintings even, um,
yep.
rather than just relying on these companies that, as you said, are probably going to start outsourcing a lot more. I mean,
Yeah,
the art
yep,
coming out of those developing countries is honestly looking just as good as us, and it's probably half the price. So,
yep, yep. No, I think that's pretty forward thinking of you. And even if it doesn't come to that, even if you can still get freelance work, it's nice to be able to uh, diversify your income streams. It's one of the strengths of being able to of freelancing is
mm,
that when you're in house, you have one fishing line in the river, whereas when you come out and become a freelancer, you have the ability to put multiple, uh, you know, fishing lines into the river, so that if or into multiple rivers. So if one stream of income dries up, you're kind of bolstered and able to live off the other while while regrouping,
oh yeah,
I suppose.
yeah,
Um, and I think it's just risk mitigation. It's an intelligent thing to do. So.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So you mentioned your book that you're working on. So let's talk a little bit about this. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is it? What are you working on?
I guess I'm writing on this. I'm writing this book. As you know, I write a lot of stuff on Facebook
Yeah.
about the business side of things. Um, just because I think it's such an underserved area that's really, really important to artists who want to make it out there as a freelancer or even as a professional.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm trying to put all the lessons that I've learned over my 8 year career as a professional artist into a book that people can kind of reference and learn, I suppose, little strategies on things like how to manage your time, budgeting, figuring out your hourly rate, some of the stuff that we've talked about already.
Mhm.
Uh, but um, but yeah, really delving deeply into that. Time management is another huge thing. Um, yeah, I just think it's a really underserved side of this industry, and I'm not really sure why, to be honest.
Mhm.
There's a plethora of people who have set up schools dealing with the art making side of art,
Mhm.
but there's so few people who or so few schools that have tackled the business side of things.
Right.
Uh, and you're in exactly the same sort of situation. I think I read your stuff all the time, and yeah, not that many other people, not that many other professional artists comes to mind when I think who can I go to for business help.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And that's part of the reason I did art of freelancing to begin with is that I was freelancing full time at the time, and I was looking around and I realized there really wasn't any resources on the business side of things. Like I had to figure out most of it on my own.
yep,
And
yep,
so that's kind of where the original idea came from for that. And
yeah,
I think your book will also help to fill a lot of voids there because I think it's going to
yeah.
be filled with a lot of really good information.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be completely about freelancing. There's going to be a
Hmm.
lot of stuff about getting just into a
Right.
studio position as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just the whole spectrum of where I've been at. Even before I got into the industry, what it was like for me, and I think a lot of a lot of aspiring artists will be able to connect with that. Not feeling that you're ever going to get in there. It feels like this cloistered community, and what I personally did to kind of break into it, work my way through different teams in terms of a studio gig, and then just transitioning to freelance. Just the transition part. There's a lot of things that has to be reprogrammed in our psyche when we go from a full-time job for someone to a freelance thing. I mean, one of the major things I think is stop thinking in terms of it's not my job, because everything's your job when you become a freelancer. So it should be it's an interesting process, and I'm really enjoying it. So
yeah, I bet. So any idea when you're planning to finish it up?
I've got probably the majority of my of what I want to write about already. There's a few. So I asked on Facebook about what things people will find important, and I want to write specific answers to some of those. I've got maybe 500 pages of unedited stuff already. It's going to maybe balloon out to 700, but I'm going to try to cut that in half once I'm done. So there's a lot of stuff there. And then once that's done, I'll probably start looking for. I'm not sure which way I want to go right now. I'm still researching into that. There's a lot to be said about going purely to ebooks, but some research that I've looked at recently is really interesting in saying that ebooks is good, but it's not quite there yet, especially for non-fiction authors. There's still a lot to be said for print. For instance, Tim Ferriss, his best-selling book, 4 Hour Workweek, was it was #1 for quite a while on the Kindle store, and he's also #1. It was number 1 on the New York's bestsellers. But overall, in terms of income, it was 1.6% in terms of income. When you're comparing the physical book sales to ebooks, so there's a lot to be said for books still.
Oh, definitely.
So
do you think you'll go down that route and try to find a publisher for this, or what's your plan there?
I think my business coach is helping me with figuring out what I need to work on a proposal, because what I need to do is obviously propose to publishers and be able to get an advance and that sort of thing. So I think I'll be working on a proposal relatively soon. Just finding the time, I suppose, in between everything else.
We do have to juggle a lot of things.
And I don't know if I'd want it any other way. I really enjoy being able to do so many different things. I'm the type of guy that gets kind of bored if I'm always doing the same thing.
Same here. So how has it been writing? Because I do a little bit of blog writing at least, so I can kind of relate. How is the experience writing as opposed to painting or whatnot?
I actually find it's got quite a lot of similarities and a lot of parallels. You start off with this thumbnail sketch, I suppose, of what you want to write. It's very loose. It's very jagged. Then you jump in and you do maybe a first pass at it. Could be kind of like a more detailed sketch if you're thinking in terms of drawing. Then once you get to a certain point, you cut off all the extraneous parts, simplify it a little bit, just to get to the intent. Just make sure that you're getting to the intent of what you're writing, and then developing from there, which could be akin to developing a proper full rendering if you're talking illustration. So there's lots of parallels, and I kind of think of writing as painting with words, I suppose. Whether I'm any at it or not, that's for other people but I enjoy it. So
that's good. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. You post some great stuff on Facebook, so I can only imagine that the book will be at least as good.
Much.
So you mentioned developing an IP. How's that going?
It's going well. I'm actually working on a children's book that we're hoping to. We're working on the first children's book. That's taken quite a few. Probably taken a couple of years now from when we first discussed it to developing it. I've got a pretty tight schedule. I've got to complete about 3 to 4 illustrations a month for that to be to finish by early next year, and then we'll be looking for publishers for that, and then hopefully to be able to make a series of them. And then ideas for that is to change into, build up a bit more of a following with possibly an iPad release, and then hopefully looking to pitch it to film studios and television networks as well, to possibly develop it into a bit more of a like a media product, I suppose.
Cool.
So that's one thing that I'm working on. Then I've got that other that other product that I'm working on that I haven't really announced just quite yet. And with the book, that's taking up a lot of time as well. I've just started another thing with a fellow artist, doing the monthly sketch group thing where I can get to meet other artists. We've got that under the banner of the Creative Club at the moment, and we like to run short course workshops on things that will help artists, such as what to do when you're setting up at conventions and stuff like that. Just stuff that we find interesting ourselves, and hopefully would other aspiring artists.
Yeah, that's really cool, and it's amazing how many different things you're doing, and I think that's a good takeaway for people. We don't just like sit on our computer and do concept art all day and paint giant spaceships and whatnot. We do a lot of different things. Which I personally really enjoy. I like bouncing around. I get really sick of something if I spend too much time on it. So I like to have all these different things going on. And just like you, I've got a bunch of side projects I'm trying to develop. So I think we all try to do that.
No, I look forward to all the stuff that you're working on as well. So
just got to find time for all of it. So cool. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I figured now would probably be a good time to open it up for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to.
If that works for you. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask them now. Try to make them amazing, awesome questions. And we'll do this for, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. See how it goes.
Sure.
Okay. And Darren, if there's anything else you really wanted to talk about, feel free to just talk.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty good, I think.
All right, good. I know you had a lot of notes, so I hate for those to go to waste. All right, here's
nothing.
Nothing too important.
Yeah, I think we covered most of them, to be honest.
All right, good.
I'm glad I didn't really have to read off them. I kind of thought, I'm gonna forget a lot of stuff. So, but most of it actually came off quite naturally. So
good. Let's see here. Read through a few questions and find a good one.
Yep.
What do you think about getting into gallery art?
Gallery art. Myself personally, I used to want to get into it quite a bit, and I think the reason behind that was I felt that I would have greater freedom in doing the kind of artwork that I like. I kind of like the idea of not having a client that I have to please and being able to go in my own direction. But I think that if you want to be a working artist and being able to make a living from it, I think there's still a certain level of sorry, my brain's fried, but being able to compromise on your vision and meet somewhere in between. I mean, that's my practicality speaking about it. Is it going to look good on someone else's wall, and is it going to meet some part of your soul as well? But I think I think I can quench that thirst through pursuing my own IP creation. So these days I'm not as interested as establishing a fine art career, but I know for a lot of people that that's something that they want to do. But I think it's important to look at what are the underlying reasons of why you want to go down that path, and it will make perfect sense for a lot of people. But at the same time, I guess it's an important question to ask. can I meet my needs somewhere else? Um, yeah, I think that's all I can really say about that. I've never really done any gallery work, so I can't talk about the realities of that. That'd just be conjecture, I think.
Right.
How about you?
Just not,
What do you?
I'd like to do it probably pretty far down the road. I would say like 5 to 10 years from now, I might want to start getting into it. For the time being, I think I'm happy doing the concept / illustration, and then my own IP development and teaching and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I think I'm pretty happy with that for now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
you had a question
I mean,
here. Oh, sorry.
I think just on that same point,
Uh-huh.
I think Danny Levisi is a
Oh, yeah.
huge inspiration for me anyway. Like he is this guy who taught himself artwork, and he's gone out and figured out his own IP, built a massive following
Yeah.
of people that just. I mean, and I'm one of them. I'm one of those people that I just love the whole idea of last man standing, and yeah, it's just this beacon of light, I suppose. That hey, if Danny can do it, then we can do it too. And I find it very encouraging. So
Yeah, definitely. They were actually talking about that in the chat earlier, but I mean, he really is quite the inspiration. It's been pretty wild to see what he's been able to do.
yeah,
It's really nice.
Yeah.
Got a question here about speed, as far as how long it takes us to do something, what kind of deadlines we have. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so getting artwork done, I'm relatively fast at what I do. I can maybe it really depends. I mean, there's a lot of artwork that doesn't require backgrounds that I do, and those things can be done in a relatively short amount of time. It's usually the feedback and iteration process that takes a little bit more time, but I'd say a very rough time frame for a decent full illustration would be maybe 3-4 days. That could be drawn out, or less time depending on the art director and how well you know them and that sort of thing. I'm always of the mentality, and I'm quite conscious of a lot of younger artists wanting to go really quickly and doing the art really quickly.
Right.
And I'm not a huge proponent of that. I'm more keen to see people spending the time that they need to do the artwork well, because I think that speed will come as a result, or as a bright byproduct of experience. The more that you know your skill set, the more that you use it, it's just naturally going to occur. So focusing on speed is not really something that I'd say focus on. Focus on the quality. The speed will come later, I think.
I totally agree. And I think this next question could probably have a similar answer. But it's talking about style, and people are asking whether to focus on a specific style or to try to branch out and be able to do a ton of different kind of styles. And what would you say for that?
I know this is probably going to be quite different from your answer, because I remember reading that you were more in the get specific camp.
Yeah.
But I found, maybe because I'm in Australia and there isn't so much one kind of work, that I've had to be quite. I have a wide gamut of styles that I can comfortably do, and I enjoy all the different styles. I even go into complete vector art, for instance, and I also even enjoy doing pure graphic design. And a part of that is my personality. I get very bored just doing one thing, even if it sounds really cool, like drawing monsters all day. I would get bored of that.
Right.
So I like to do lots of different work, and I think that if I'm always doing different work, it will help my my artistic sensibilities as a whole. So even doing graphic design will teach me lessons about balance and alignment and all that sort of stuff. That working on concept art all the time for me might not. I might get dull because of that.
Yeah.
So I'm in the camp of if you have a wider skill set, and assuming that you're decent at a number of them, for me it's a method of risk mitigation, meaning that if work was to fall off in one specific area, I can transition across quite easily to something else. In when I was in in a studio environment, I was very aware of the fact that concept art generally doesn't exist for the whole period of a project, right? It generally only exists for um, maybe 30% of a project, and then a lot of the heavy lifting is done in production and trying to meet a lot of those things and make a good game, film, or whatever it is. So I felt that if I want to increase my chances of being able to stay on a team or increase my longevity on a project, it was helpful to have other skill sets that were considered production skill sets. So what we have is concept. Generally, you have concept and then production side of things. So I like to be able to straddle both. And I decided, well, there's not a lot of people that are really well versed with user interfaces, and in my computer design in my computer science course, I had a bit of I enjoyed user interface, and so I took my 2D skills and brought them into being able to do user interfaces as well. So if work dries up in one area, I can also transition across to creating user interfaces, doing icon work and all that sort of stuff, which I enjoy on a different level. So for me, it's always been the aspect of risk mitigation, being able to have a wide skill set.
Right.
Being able to show a certain style, though, it definitely has positives in a lot of ways as well. Like, if you have a certain style, you are a little bit more recognizable. Someone can see your work and go, that's Noel Bradley's work.
Right.
Whereas you do lots of different styles, people might not necessarily recognize your stuff as much.
Yeah.
So
and that's kind of always been my approach. Is I do lean more towards the find a good style, find a good niche for yourself. But I do see how being kind of multi-talented can be extremely useful. Like I know, for instance, 3D. A lot of people in the chat are talking about 3D industry. That is extremely good thing to learn if you want to get a job in a game company. Because as you said, like most of the work is production work. Concept is a very small portion of it. So there's a lot more 3D work to be done than there is 2D. So being able to do both is really, really good, especially if you want to be in-house.
Yeah, definitely. I was also talking to some friends who are in even DreamWorks, and there's quite a shift to people to art directors looking to hire people with those multiple skill sets as well, especially 3D. I think there's. I'm not sure if you've gone to ZBrush, but I know that quite a few people like Anthony Jones have been concepting in 3D quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I've used ZBrush for quite a lot of concept work and some production work as well. And I find that if you use it in the right way, I found it to be a really it speeds stuff up immensely. I hate doing turnarounds. I feel it's like, oh my god, it's the worst thing for me. It's I hate doing turnarounds because you have to line up everything. It feels so tedious to me. Being able to sculpt someone's face and then doing the turnarounds and doing a quick paint over, it's so much less horrible for me.
I totally agree. In the few character jobs I've done, turnarounds have been awful. I hate doing them. I mean, I love doing like the glamour shot, like where you get the nice 3/4 angle, but turnarounds, God, they are tedious. So it's interesting to hear. So I guess we're hitting about 2 hours now, so we should probably wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Did you have any last advice for people starting out, or students, or really anyone shooting to be in the industry?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about this, but I think that just having that persistence and holding on to that dream is a really important thing to do. Have a very clear idea of why you're chasing your goal, and and when you hit those tough times, and you generally will. I don't know of any successful or sufficient concept artists who are freelance, or illustrators who are freelancers, if that's where you want to go. I don't know any of them that haven't had tough times, very, very challenging times that make them question their choice and career. And because I was one of them as well. Very early on, I was just like, I can't believe I chose this.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's so trying. Why do I have to always be uncertain of things? And had a bit of a pity party for myself. And
Right.
but there's a point at which you have to remind yourself of why you were chasing it in the first place, and it's really important, because you can just get lost in some of the tough times, and just lose your way. That's why some artists become bitter and cynical, because they've forgotten the initial magic of why they wanted to do something in the first place.
Right.
And if you remind yourself consistently of why you want to do it, and hopefully your reasons are good, and it's more than just making money, because if you want to make squillions of money, go do something else.
Yeah.
You make a good living at this, but your whole driving thing has to be, it's about the artwork. It's about having passion in creating the artwork. It's about living the lifestyle, and it's important to understand that it's not just a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
For me anyway, there's a lot of times when I'll finish client work and I'll go, okay, I'm gonna relax now,
Mhm.
and then I'll be like, oh crap, I just closed Photoshop, so I'm gonna open it up again and just do a perfect finish.
Right.
That's stuff we do for fun as well, but it helps us reconnect, I think, with the idea of freelancing as a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
cool.
yeah.
Well, I think that's really good advice. Keeping persistent, keeping that love about it.
How about yourself? What would you say to artists as well?
I mean, honestly, what you said is very true. I mean, it does take a lot of hard work and a lot of persistence. And I do suggest people really work on what they love. Because I mean, it can turn into a job really easily, and there's no need for that, especially early on. And I mean, just keep in mind that you are getting into this career because you really love doing it. So I think you're right on the money there. So cool. I think that's about it from me. Well, thank you very, very, very much for doing this. I really appreciate you coming on here.
No, that's no worries at all. I really enjoyed myself as well, and I hope hopefully people have some lessons to take away from that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it helps them.
Yeah, I think people will probably find this very useful. So thank you again. I'll be putting this online in the next week or so everybody can link it up. But thank you again. Thanks for watching live, and thank you, Darren.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Noah, and thanks for everyone for listening. Okay, see you guys.